I cannot believe that person is so successful. They got so many downloads. They sell so many books. Everybody's talking about them. Why? We're going to talk about that in this episode of Horrible Writing. That will never work. You can't publish that. Seriously? Don't. Oh my God, that's another thing you do. That's bad. You probably should find other hobbies. You ever learn how to spell? Stop. Be happy. Well, you don't bother. I've seen better people. Do you really want to and my third grade, get up. Welcome to Horrible Writing, the rawest, most candid, in-your-face writing show on the interwebs because none of us have time to suck. Let's do this. All right, hey listeners, Paul Sading, your host. How are you doing? I have an illustrious member of the audio drama community with me, a fellow writer, fellow audio dramatist, and someone who's actually comfortable enough to talk about jealousy. None other than Jonathan Goldberg of, well, you'll find them on Twitter at Brushy Sunshine, which, Jonathan, at some point I'm going to have to ask you about that. But the show title is The Fall of the House of Sunshine. It's a serialized musical audio drama. Folks, those of you who love watching musicals and you don't think it's possible to replicate that art form in an audio-only medium, au contraire, my friend, it is. And this show actually absolutely proves that it is. So, Jonathan, welcome to Horrible Writing.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for being here. So, I think that that it translates. We'll find. I mean, that's something we're always discussing and figuring out, right? Whether right. Anything translates to anything or anything works, but you just keep trying.
You keep trying. You don't give up. That's and that's a great spirit for the topic, or I'm sorry, for the brand of this show. Anyways, you keep trying. You don't give up. So. You and I were going back and forth about topics, and you really hit on a great one. And I was excited to talk to you about that because any artist, I believe, if they're being honest, any artist has, imposter syndrome questions, and there's got to be a little bit of envy. For 9.5 out of 10 of us, the only other portion is that person who just stumbles into instant success. And they probably still feel it too, I would imagine. It's kind of human nature. But to talk about jealousy from a creative bent as a creator yourself to an audience of creators, I think you're going to find, a lot of people hanging on your every word to hear what your take is on it, why you think about it, why you were comfortable talking about it, and etc. So let's jump right in with that. Why were you okay and interested in talking about jealousy as a topic in a public forum? Because we're supposed to be brave and fearless, charging into the world with our stories, and we don't get jealous. We're not that petty as creators. So, Jonathan, why? Why jealousy?
There is this sort of myth of these writers of being completely devoid of each other. But even if you look back, I think through all the great writers have jealousy and have competitions and have that sort of thing. And it's about when it balances between positive jealousy and negative jealousy and finding why you're jealous about something or what is in that you can then take to your own self and make yourself a better writer. I think, competition can on some level be healthy, even though I don't necessarily like the idea of the arts as a competition or awards and that sort of thing as the thing, and the idea of that there's a best picture winner or a best anything. It's more just a favorite or a personal choice, and the idea of sort of competing properties that really aren't similar at all against each other is a very weird thing. But I think you can look at something and say like, oh, I wish I wrote that, or, oh, why is that so popular when I don't like it? But then you can also look and say, well, why do people like it? What are they getting out of it? And I think too, as you mature on some level, I think, when I was in high school, I think in early college, if there was something I didn't like, I wanted no one else to like it. And anyone who thought that that was good, I thought they were just terrible. But then you start to realize that the arts are subjective. There's no really objective good or bad, and even one thing will be someone's favorite thing, even something you can't imagine someone would love. And it's sort of finding that and accepting that. And I'd say the hardest thing with jealousy is when you want to be supportive to your friends, to fellow creators, but then you see them constantly on certain lists or constantly getting, especially in the modern age with Twitter and with Facebook and this sort of instant reaction. There's times when you put out an episode and it's crickets, and someone else puts out something and it's getting tons of comments or tweets, and you're sort of like, well, why not? Because partly too, if you believe in the product you're putting out, it's, people can not like my show, but I want people to know it's there, to choose not to like, to have the chance to know about it. And it's about, sometimes you just feel like it's breaking through in the idea of like, if I could just let people know about this, and why is this thing getting so much attention, but I'm not? And what does that mean? And is, too, the difficulty in a capitalist society is that so much of success is just based on money, or based on the idea of commerce and the idea of, oh, well, how much money did you make doing that? Or how many downloads? It's not about the creative success of just putting something into the world that you feel might make a positive contribution. It comes down to this sort of, well, this made this much, or this got this many advertisers, or this got this many downloads. So sometimes too, with the jealousy, you can stop and look back and reevaluate even the sense of, why do I care about this? Does it matter this? Would you rather be, a niche thing where you're putting out the thing you really care about and you really want to, but you're not getting a mass audience? Or do you want to just try to ride trends, put out something you don't even particularly like, but become really popular for it? And I think you would hate yourself just as much for putting out work and getting praised for work that you don't believe in than putting out work that you really believe and love and only having, a very small audience for it. I guess that's my just overall big answer to that question.
No, and that's great, because it actually gave me a couple things that I want to make sure that I hit on with you. One of the things, to understand kind of who you are as a creative, as before we get into the deeper level effects and the tactics that you use to ensure your own, obviously, mental health first, but your creative health as well. So before we get into that, kind of understanding the toll that this has taken on you. So, as only as comfortable as you are sharing it, and going back to something that's maybe pertinent and relative to the conversation, not necessarily 8-year-old Jonathan jealousy, but, creative Jonathan jealousy. How does it manifest itself in you? What types of things? Because I know what jealousy can do for me, and I've recently employed more healthy tactics to manage it myself, but it's different for everybody. So for you, when you're seeing or feeling that creative jealousy, what happens?
Lots of different things, I think, at once. I think that there's just a knee-jerk, just like punch in the gut sort of reaction, or just in like that twisting sort of just like instant like upsetness, both like on some level some kind of anger and just regret, and it gets that sort of woe is me at first, and then you kind of try to unpack that. But there is that, I think, that just initial flash of just like, why is this happening? And I think there's like a sense of, even though it's not, you just take it personally on some level, because I think, as a writer on some level, I think you feel like, well, I could do everything. I could, my writing should be in every theater across America, or it should be on like everyone's top podcast list, or anything. And it just becomes this weird personal reflection, I think, too, because writing is so personal. What you're doing is you're putting yourself out there. And so if you're ignored for that, or if you're not getting some attention, there is that, I think, a knee-jerk just taking it personal. It's not like you're just doing office reports, and then if someone's not directly think you write the best office reports, you're personally offended by that. So I think there is this sense of this personal reaction to things that you have to sort of identify and then start to move to get back. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that first flash of just direct reaction of just like lizard brain, sort of like, what's going on here, in this sort of just very reactive emotion, from a very just emotional, non-intellectual place, and then unpack that and try not to let it get you depressed or so the point where you don't want to write and you don't want to even try, and you just are like, what's the point of all this? Which is that first reaction, which, when you've like submitted to contests or you submitted plays for a season or something, and you get that sort of form email list of just, we don't want this, and that's a hard thing to get. And then when they announce the winners, and then, you try not to just be complete sour grapes or just try to dismiss it and just be mad about it. You try to figure, again, because it is so subjective, you can't, even though it is all personal, you can't take it personally either, because it's just one person's opinion. So
right. So how does, God, I want to ask you about the tactics, but I typically save that for later. So let's table that for right now, because I do want to kind of understand how you manage yourself. You provided some, listeners, you can't see it. Jonathan and I are on video together, and I was nodding along as he was answering because I identify with a lot of what he's saying. So, Jonathan, I do want to get to that at a later point, or we can weave it in naturally wherever. But I do want to know about, specific tactics that you've used. It will be helpful to someone out there, even if it's just one person. It's still one person that benefits. But maybe in answering this, or in one of the questions I've got coming up for you, right at the beginning, you talked about, these award things and the competitive nature of them. And, it's great for the fans. They've got no emotional, well, some fans take their show seriously, so they do have an emotional investment, but their emotional investment pales in comparison to us. Like you said, when you write something, when you create something, you're putting part of you out there to be judged. So that's why these things can be damaging to a creative spirit. How does, especially with you and your show, again, I had never heard about you. It's kind of like what you were talking about there, right? You put something out there and it goes crickets. I'd never heard about you until somebody in the network that we were part of mentioned your show, and that's how I found you. And then when I heard you, I thought, wow, I put a lot of work into my shows, but this is crazy. This is crazy levels of effort that they must be putting into building the story, all of those actors, and then on top of it, just the musical aspect of it. And it's very classy. It's very well done. It's very funny. And because it's a musical, you probably don't get the attention that you should. That's Paul's opinion. You probably don't get the attention you should simply because of what it is. So for you, how does that aspect of, it's 2018 when we're doing this interview, and anybody who's familiar with audio drama in 2018 knows that if it's sci-fi, it sells. It doesn't matter. You could put a dog in space, 4 million people are going to download it, because that's the thing. So, Jonathan, for you, does it, and if so, how so, does the popular swing of that pendulum affect your creative decisions for you and your team?
I think trying to guess what's going to sell in the market is a crazy game, and it's not really. And again, it's about making what we want. It's following our passions. And while there's like sci-fi elements to it, there's also, we sort of draw from all different kind of tropes and genres and all. And I know we're sort of a niche of a niche of a niche by being a musical, which already turns off a certain amount of people, being a comedy, which doesn't necessarily get as much praise as dramas through across all mediums. I think that's true. And, our tone is silly, and we sort of are very much just kind of like, come along for the ride and just go along. And so I think partly stepping away, we do realize that, that we have these barriers to entry, and even just being audio dramas at all, we're sort of already the redheaded stepchild of the podcast world, which is all, if I really just wanted to like hit 1 million downloads, I would just, read true crime Wikipedia entries and put that out. Because I feel like, but what would that nourish my soul? Would that make me happy? Is that, just trying to guess what's going to make other people happy? And then it comes all about just audience at that point, But for me, it's about following those things for myself and stepping back and saying, this is the show I want to write. And, it is the hardest thing, unlike other genres, is there's the best thing about podcasts and audio drama, and the worst thing is there are no gatekeepers. There's no major reviewers coming out every week saying, this is good, this is bad. That we have a small cadre of people who are starting to come up and starting to get some attention reviewing audio drama, but there's not like the New York Times has a dedicated podcast reviewer, or Vulture even. They'll maybe touch on a couple big name podcasts, but no one is really sifting through audio drama the way and doing recaps like they do with television or with movies. And on some level, that's great because there's no one stopping that flow and there's no one who's arbitrating what is good and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's no one helping to shepherd and curate people who want to jump in, because you just try to say like, whoa, oh, I want to listen to audio drama. And all of a sudden there's these thousands of things staring at you and you have no idea how to begin to parse them and find the ones that would interest you, or even apart from just the quality or the skill, but just finding, how do I begin to find things that I want to listen to? It seems so daunting and there's no hand holding and there's no real way inside of it. And then to be a niche show within that, there is a sense of like, how do you stand out if you don't have a big ad budget or something to try to advertise or try to get there? You don't have like the sort of Gimlet or Wondery money or Amazon money or any of these sort of networks, these big corporately funded networks. And I mean, on the other hand of that, we have no corporate masters. We make the show we want to make. No one's giving us notes. No one's telling us how many widgets we have to sell, and we can't say this because it might offend somebody who wants to buy this thing. So, there's all those trade-offs and all. So I think with the jealousy and all, it comes out of me, I think, in the sense of like, why does no one know we're here? Why does, I look at all this talent we're doing, and not just what I'm doing, but also all these actors and Matt doing the music and the engineering and just like the quality we're putting out. And it's just sort of the sense of sometimes, and I've had this too doing theater, of just, you're sort of throwing this into the void and then you're like, is anyone out there? Is there another end to this? And so then when you do get that praise on Twitter or Facebook, or someone reviews you on iTunes who's not like just a friend of yours who you've been guilting into trying to make attention for you, it's just sort of like, wow, this person owes me nothing, and they're listening and they're connecting with me across this. And that's what sort of, what the art ultimately is about, is sort of having these personal conversations on a grand scale, which is what I try to do. So I think that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. And so when it comes to your creative process, your creative brain, let's get real. How has jealousy, it's a two-parter. How has jealousy damaged, and how has jealousy benefited that element, that creative element, that creative spirit of you?
It's damaging in the way of just when you start brooding over it, and it impacts your ability to write, to your ability to keep going and making the thing you want to make. When you just get too caught up in, when you see the release of either end of year awards, or even when I see like the theater season comes out and I see all these people getting these plays and these productions, and I just want to just give up and just say like, why am I bothering to do this? No one cares. No one likes this. And then you start to turn it inward too. And you wonder, am I not even good? Am I like deluding myself? Am I, do I think I'm a good writer, but I'm not a good writer at all? And if I was a good writer, wouldn't I be getting these things? And then, that sort of stunts it. But when, you can turn that around, when you can say like, well, I wouldn't want to be this show. Even shows I like, I say like, wow, that's great. They're making this, they're doing this, but that's not what I want to do. And if I just slap my name on that, that's not who I am. That's not what I want to do. And you can kind of step outside and appreciate them for what they're doing and make you a better writer, because you're saying like, wow, they're doing something great. They're following their passion. I have to figure out how to do that and put my work out there and try to focus on why I'm doing this. And it isn't just to prove a point to somebody or say like, I'm this show, I have this many downloads. And then too, sometimes, everyone curates themselves also, and they're putting their best foot forward. And as far as I know, there's people jealous of my show, and I would be, stunned by that, because when you're a writer, you have to look like you're not doing any work to make this thing. It sort of looks like, oh yeah, I just created this thing, and wow, isn't it amazing? They don't see all the hard work and all the drafts and all the stress. And I don't see that for all those other shows either. And I don't see all the things that they've put together. You just see the final product, and it has to try to look effortless. And the idea of like, oh, this all just came together and we just put this thing out here. And so everyone's seeing this sort of fake version of this final product without seeing how much these other shows that I, can be dismissive of how much work they put in week to week, how much they're thinking about the plot and the characters just as much as I am, struggling just as much as I am, and who they're competing against. And if I was more popular, I would still there's still always someone more popular than you to still be upset about. And even if you're at the top, then all you're worried about is who's going to take over from you and how long can I stay at the top. And, so I think you have to realize no matter what you have, you're not going to be settled in it. But that's the positive thing too, because as soon as you stop being competitive, stop caring about these things, it means you don't really care about what you're putting out, because you don't want that. I want as big an audience as possible because I'm proud of the content I'm making. I'm proud of these things that I'm putting together. And so the positive aspect of jealousy is it reminds you that you care about what you're doing, that you want to do more and want to put more out there. So I'd say those are the two sides there.
That is beautiful, because I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment. Folks, we didn't rehearse that. I want to take a second out of this episode to ask you, are you a writer? Are you trying to sell books? Are you not selling as many books as you want to sell? Have you ever thought about getting into podcasting in order to grow an audience of future readers? My first nonfiction book is now out. Novel, Idea to Podcast, How to Sell More Books Through Podcasting. It teaches you from concept to execution why and how getting into podcast is a key for all writers going forward. Pick it up on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Nobles, wherever you get your books from. And the second book I want to tell you about is from a friend of the show, Kay Kenyon. Do you love dark, intriguing historical fantasy? Meet Kim Tavistock, England's secret agent with PSI powers. Kim faces off with Nazis, traitors, and the coming storm. An invasion using a terrifying power over cold and ice. Called a superb adventure by Publishers Weekly, At the Table of Wolves is now available in print, ebook, and audio. Book 1 of the Dark Talents trilogy by Kay Kenyon. You can find more about Kay and her books over at kaykenyon.com/novels. Definitely check her out. Kay's a dear friend of the show, and you'll enjoy that read. Now let's get back to this interview. I think you just hit it right on the nose, Jonathan. If you don't feel a twinge at seeing someone else's success, how much do you really care about what you're doing? And like you say, I've told people that forever. I get anybody who knows the amount of stuff I've created, always, I get comments all the time about, God, I wish I could write as much as you do. How do you do it? No, you don't. Like you were saying, you don't want to know when the webcam with Jonathan goes off, or the early mornings, or the stuff that I do inside of my head. It's not always necessarily the most healthy thing that gets me to be as prolific as I can be. Whether or not it's good, it doesn't matter. That's a whole separate issue. But yeah, you're right on. And you've got to be happy. I mean, I'm with you, Jonathan. I don't know. Just like in the book world, there are people who write to market, and I'm sure, because I watch trends all the time, I'm sure some of the people who are creating some of the audio dramas that they are creating are creating toward a trend. And I wonder how sustainable that is. I mean, if I wasn't in love with my stories, I wouldn't be able to do it for the long haul. So I don't, as far as sustainability and creativity, I don't know. It's dangerous to start flirting with things that don't spark your creativity.
Yeah, no, it's tricky. I sometimes wonder, and when I get jealous, I look and say, well, would I want to just be writing on a sitcom where I don't really care? Like, would I want to be just in a writer's room for a show that's like middling, and I'm giving up my best ideas for someone else and trying to write this thing that I don't care about, and I don't really have a creative control and just sort of a gun for hire? And yeah, the money would be great, but is it, I'm sure they're all miserable in their own way. Everyone's sort of happy and sad in their own way too, and they're all looking for the next thing. And when I do get jealous on that sense of success, it is the sense of, well, what do you want from this? What ideally do you want? Do you want to just have a staff writing job doing something, or do you want to, do your own thing for basically no money or negative money when you're producing, but you're doing the exact thing you want to be doing and no one's stopping you. And, it's just trying to find that balance and what, and again, too, I think you can use that to navigate what do you ultimately want from this? Is it about just trying to like sell your podcast as a pilot or something, or is it about making this work and how that works? And is it between? And it doesn't always have to be one thing or another. I think it can change and go back and forth, and opportunities come in all different forms and shapes. And it's, as long as I think you're doing the work, at least the beginning, that's again making you happy, you're not chasing trends, you're at least happy with the product itself. You're not necessarily always like, well, how do I sell this? How do I make money off this? How do I just use this as a stepping stone? To me, this is the product. This is the thing. This isn't just a wedge to open a different door for me. So that's why
and that's perfect. And folks, if this is your first episode of Horrible Writing that you've listened to, the tagline for the show is empowerment through candor. And Jonathan's being very candid with us, which I really appreciate, Jonathan, because too often in the public space, we're interested in projecting a brand, go to get into the corporate speak of it, which is, you've got to do to an extent, depending on what your goals and ambitions are, of course. But at the same time, very rarely do we get real, raw, candid conversation about these things. And again, it's something I believe in, like you've said, everybody, even at the top, we're all watching, we're all, remaining aware of the landscape. So when it comes to jealousy and your creativity, I, for the vast majority of my stuff, create alone. When it comes to the higher end stuff, I work with John over at Dog and Pony Studios to do the sound because he's well beyond my capabilities. But besides that, everything else is on my own. For you, as a creative, and for maybe folks listening who are audio dramatists or aspiring audio dramatists, or are looking at collaborative writing projects, how does this work in that spectrum from one end being Jonathan Goldberg, the individual / writer, to Jonathan being a team member on a team where everybody's relying on him and he's relying on everybody else? How does that play into it? Is one, I don't want to say better. Boy, that's a bad word. But is one healthier for you as a creative? Or is it not about one healthier than the other? It's about how you manage jealousy in those completely different spectrums.
I think partly coming from theater, which is an insanely collaborative medium, and the idea of you have to kind of hand over, everyone has to do their job and everyone to their ability too. I think it's about making the best product you can make. And part of that is by putting your ego aside and letting the actors be the actors, letting the producers, produce, let the engineers know what they're doing, the sound effects. And as long as you're positive and as long as you all believe you're working towards the best product, you have to trust. And I think trust is the key. And, it is tricky. And someone comes up with something in the room and it gets a big laugh or something and you wonder, and you're like, well, it says this. And about being able to take those discoveries and moments in the room and really making them work and sort of setting your ego aside and also being open to listening and to what other people bring in and when they have questions and using those questions to help shape it. Like when I present a draft to Matt, he'll bring up things and say like, well, I don't know about this part, or I don't know about this, or what about this? And, and we'll challenge it and we'll challenge each other to make the work stronger. Because again, when it comes to something, you can get so inside your own head, you don't necessarily know what's reading, what's not coming across, what's there. And so having that other outside voice, I think too, and even when we were recording, an actor will say, why am I saying this? What does this line mean? Or why am I here? What am I, and sometimes that does get you to question it, to think about it. And so especially too, when you're writing, to go into thinking about that, what is this actor going to say about this? What are these people going to say? Can I justify every line in this on some level, even if the justification is just, I like the musicality of these words, or this moves this apart. Like this line in episode 2 is going to be a callback to episode 11. And, sometimes too, with the actors, what's great about them is they're thinking about just their character, whereas you're sort of have to think about the whole forest, the whole arc of the season. So sometimes they can come with a question of like, well, why is my character doing this? And you can't just have the answer be like, so that then this character can do this later on. And that's not really, to me, an acceptable answer on some level. It's just plot mechanics. Like they need to go here so that X, Y, and Z can happen later. Hopefully too, it's like also because it fits within their character. And it's all that stuff you have to kind of balance and juggle, and having multiple people, I think just helps keep you honest with that and help push you to not take easy ways, not take an easy way out, or to just be like, good enough, let's move on. Which, I think,
and with as a creative who operates in two different spaces, you are in your head when you're writing scripts, but you've got to take it to everybody and say, okay, here's the world, let's deal with it. In your head, you can whine and mope and gripe and all that stuff, and then, okay, that's enough being a baby. Let me, be a grown-up now and just deal with the fact and celebrate other people's successes. So you can deal with jealousy in your own head. But has it come out before in a team setting? And if so, how did you manage that? How did you keep it from, maybe even fracturing a team or another member on that team?
I think, it probably has in certain ways. I'd say less so with the podcast. Everyone's been so giving and sharing. But I mean, I did my my master's in dramatic writing, so we would do a lot of workshops. We'd have all of us presenting things, and then we had to critique them and discuss them. And I had teachers who some of them would try to foster hostility between us as well, or just competition between us. And I had one teacher who, after we did presentations, would just go around and be like, which piece do you wish you wrote that you didn't write, as just sort of a thing. And that's sort of, I remember him coming to me with that. And I was just like, I don't wish I wrote any of the pieces. I respect them. I like them, but they're those people's voices. I'm writing my voice pieces. And so then he's just sort of like, oh, so you think you wrote the best piece? And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. That first of all, what does the best piece mean? Like, that's such a arbitrary thing, but I'm writing about the things I care about the most. So on some level, I should care about my piece the most because it's about my things. And so I think in that too, when you're presenting stuff in a workshop, when you're doing that, and you want to be the best student in class, you want to sort of win the workshop on some level. You want the teacher to be, and all the people to just be like, wow, that's amazing, and so, but you also want to figure out how to accept that sort of critique and feedback, and how to be positive. And also, if you read something you don't like, how to also separate yourself from giving a response. It's just like, well, that's stupid, or I don't like, the hardest thing about, working with other people and writing is getting them to write helping them write the story they want to write, not the story you want them to write. And that's a very hard ego thing to do, because you just want to kind of go in and be like, well, if I wrote this, I would do this and this and this, and I would care about this part of the story. And you have to kind of step back and say, no, you're not writing this, they're writing this. How do you get them to do that? And I think too, that's again where ego and jealousy come in. When you see something and you're like, oh man, I wish I was writing this because I would do this and this with it. And to step back from that and, say like, you're not writing this though, right? And you can write your own version of it. And I think too, certain times if I'm really jealous of something, I say, well, or I think something's getting praise that I'm like, I don't really like this kind of thing. I sometimes will say, well, I'm going to write this kind of story to see what it's actually like to write this sort of genre, or this kind of play, or this kind of story, to see what it's like to actually be inside that kind of story that I personally am less interested in. How do I write a version of this that is something that I care about? And again, those people that we see and we think are getting praise, or we think are writing the market, we have no idea what's actually going on in their head. And if they actually are writing their passion, it just happens to coalesce with where the general audience is now. So
right.
It's dangerous to try to guess what other people's motives are. And I think with jealousy, it's easy. You just want to subscribe to that sense of like, oh, they're just trying to screw me, or like, again, to take it personal to you for no reason. And even they're not even thinking about you. They're thinking about them, like, again, and they're just as, in their own head, in their own ways about things. So I think, a lot of that is like trying to ascribe everyone to have the best possible intentions, I think can try to help, whether they are or not, at least in a general level.
How does imposter syndrome, if you have been victim to it, how does imposter syndrome play into jealousy for you?
I think, it definitely does. I definitely always that. I think the jealousy comes in the sense of thinking everyone else doesn't have it. I think you look at them and there's like, wow, they're so confident. They just so trust their ability, and they're just so above it all, and they're so confident and so cool. And like, other people I've talked with in the drama community who are just seem so happy and just so with it and so like, yeah, I just made this and it's all good. And it's hard to just, you don't want to be the first person to say like, this is hard and I have no idea if I'm doing anything good and if this makes any sense, or am I like, is everyone just being nice to me and saying this is good to spare my feelings or something, or do they really on some level think I'm actually making something worthwhile? And is there a different, like, what does that mean? And and again, it's a weird thing because why would these people just be nice to me for like, why would they keep agreeing to work with me if they don't really like the work they're doing? But it's hard. And I think too, it's like, it's always easier to tear something apart than it is to defend something, to build something up, because everything's going to have flaws in it because, we're human beings and we're imperfect. So we can't rank perfect art. And there's always going to be things we wish we could have done better. We're always going to see the flaws in what we're doing because we see all the drafts, we see all the compromises. Whereas we look at someone else's work, we don't see that history. So we're always at some level saying like, well, we just barely put this together. Or this didn't come together. And then we see, we don't see all the things where they're saying the same thing. We think, oh, well, everything worked out for them. Everything is perfect. They got everything they want. They're making the thing they want to make with no compromise, no worry, no concern. So I think on that level, that insecurity leads to jealousy because you're so insecure about yourself. It's easy to just then start ascribing these other intentions or motives or history to other people.
I'm so glad you made that comment because it's such a precarious balance. You need people, you made the comment and I had to cover my mouth to not laugh in the microphone because I so got what you were at with that. You need, when you put something out there, you need to be socially validated. Otherwise, silence is a torturous enemy. It just lurks in every dark corner. It's just horrible as a creative to get silence. But there does come a point when you hear compliments and kudos and you start doing like you were just talking about, Jonathan, that the 5 whys of critical thinking to why am I getting all of this praise and all these nice things? Is it platitudes? Are people using me to? It's just horrible. So there's like a sweet spot, but that sweet spot is so narrow.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, kind of a cute question aside before we get to your horrible writing experience. Have you taken this vulnerable part of you? Because you're the one who proposed this topic and you've talked so well to it. It tells me that you've done a lot of reflection on this. You've done some serious thinking. You looked the person in the mirror and, kind of called them out on some things, I feel, or you wouldn't be able to talk to it as well as you do. So for creative inspiration, have you taken this part of you and ever embodied it inside of one of your characters in one of your stories?
Oh, sure. I'd say all of them on some level. I mean, all, characters who are insecure or jealous or worried. I mean, a lot of things too with Fall of the House of Sunshine is it's a lot about destiny and prophecy and the idea of like, what is my purpose? And the sense of like, are you fated for great things or is it all just random and whatever you achieve is what you were quote unquote destined to do because it's just what you happen to do. And it's, that sense too of being a writer and the idea of like, are you owed anything? Are you, are you meant to write something great or are you just try to write and then things happen as they happen? Is it fated or not? And just what does that mean? Or are you owed, again, the sense of just like, why am I right? Why do we write? Why do we do this? In the sense of like, was I always fated to be a writer? Did I just stumble into it? Is it something that's deeper than myself or is it just this surface level thing? And what does that mean? And also I think through the characters on that level too, just the sense of purpose and the idea of why do we need to try to fulfill this thing? Why do we, these obsessions, these things that we need to struggle against and keep doing, even though it's so frustrating, but it's the sense of like the pain of doing it is so much, but the pain of not doing it is even greater so that we keep doing it because it would hurt more not to do it, even when it is painful to do it.
Yes. Totally. All right, listeners. At this point, if this is your first episode, you won't know this. Those of you who are experts know what I'm about to do to Jonathan. For you newbies, every time I have someone come on the show, I do what all good hosts do. I make them uncomfortable, and then I make them a little more uncomfortable. Jonathan's about to share a horrible writing experience of his. Now, you would ask, why would I do that? Well, Jonathan gets to decide ultimately what he shares, but here's my thinking behind it. We're all imperfect creatures. We're all beautiful tragedies. You will look at people like Jonathan, you will hear his show and the immense talent that it contains, and you will think, gosh, I'd love to do that, but fill in the blank. I wish I could write audio drama with all that music, but we do this to ourselves as creatives, and it's a defense mechanism. But I believe that we all have stories inside of us, and if we are truly passionate about doing it, that we can do these things, whatever these things are, whatever your goals are. So I ask my guests to come on, share their horrible writing experience as a moment of empowerment, to empower you. Now, you may not have the exact experience that Jonathan has, but listen to his story, see where he went, what it took him, and realize ultimately through all of that, he's still out there creating some wonderful stuff. So Jonathan, with that said, what is your horrible writing experience?
All right, let's. Several years ago, I was invited by a theater company to go to a retreat, like a 3-day retreat at a college over the summer. And I had been working on this play with a sound designer. Her idea was sort of to remake a Greek tragedy story, but use contemporary music. And that was her very basic idea, and then sort of let me go free rein with it. And with it, I sort of created this sort of Greek structured story that had then sort of was about the end of the Greeks, the Greek mythology running into sort of early Christian mythology, and it sort of played up on making fun of religion, sort of in a Jarre sort of Ubu Roy sort of way of just really lampooning it. There was a character like the bishop, the pope, and the cardinal were all one person who just had puppets, and it was sort of playing with like, how did these Greeks just sort of like give up one mythology for another mythology? And it was sort of from a very sort of existentialist, sort of atheistic perspective. And so with she had been a sound designer for the company, so they invited her to come and do this, and sort of me as the attaché as the writer, but I didn't really know anyone there. So basically with it, you were assigned maybe 3 or 4 rehearsals, and then you would be given a public reading like on the 3rd day or something. And this group was very tight knit, but there was maybe about 40, 50 people total. And we were just sort of assigned actors, and we didn't have a director, which was sort of a mistake. I look back now to kind of control the room. It was just up to sort of me and her, and neither of us were really sort of control the room kind of people. And we were just given these actors. And one of the actors we were given was actually, which I didn't know at the time, was a born again Christian. And so we're reading through this play, and they are fighting it as we're trying to read through it. You can tell that they're not happy. All of them are not happy. They don't like it. Again, they don't know me from anybody. So there's no trust, which is keystone to like working and developing a piece. And again, too, the whole point is to sort of work on the piece. These are not finished pieces. These are but then so we start to get through it, and it's kind of at the end, and it's sort of like, well, now we're going to sort of discuss the piece. But again, with no director, just us, it just becomes the actors versus us. And this person just comes at me and is sort of like, well, who do you think you are to write this? Like, what you are just, you think you can go against, like, you think you can just come at these things and go against these ideas, and like you're being so arrogant and you're being so dismissive of this, and who are you to just come at these ideas and to even like attempt to do it? Like, this is just, pathetic. This is just embarrassing, and then once those floodgates opened, it just kept coming, and there was again no one to moderate this, no one to stop it, it was literally just us. And they're sort of like, why are you here? What are you doing here? Why are you doing this? And like the woman who I was with too, like, we didn't know how to handle it. And literally, like, it just finally ended, and we're just kind of like, we're going to go now. And then literally I was just like, I was supposed to have 2 more days there. I'm just like, I want to go home now. I don't want to be here. I hate it here. And we had to like go hear other readings. We had to go see other things. And again, all these people seem like they're having a great time. And I'm just like, go back to my like little dorm room and just collapse. And I'm just hating every minute of being there. I call my wife and I'm like, I want to come home, come and get me, please. I don't know what to do here. And we go to one of the organizers who my collaborator knew, and we were just like, this is horrible. We had a bad time, and we just, let's cancel it. Let's just completely cancel this. Let's not just cut our losses. And he was like, no. I'll come in tomorrow. I'll make sure it's better the second day. And he kind of comes in, he wants to kind of be a mediator, and all the actors are just like, oh no, we were just giving feedback. We were being positive. We were trying to help the play. And I was like, no, you were. I was, but again, like, what am I going to start fighting them on? Like, again, too,
Right.
these are all company members talking to like a director of the company, and I'm just this outside young playwright. And literally, we just said, like, look, let's just cut our losses. Let's not do. And this was like a prestigious group, and this would have been possibly great to have this reading and possibly have it seen in front of people and make connections. But we just said, like, no, because I don't want to also put up something where the actors hate what they're doing. They're not going to do a good job. They're not going to try. They can, people inside can sabotage you all kinds of ways. If someone's in there and they don't want to be doing it, they will ruin it. So we just basically called it off. I went home a day early, and it just really was so destructive. And just seeing how, especially too, creative people who are supposed to be there, who are supposed to be shepherding a process and being, when you're most vulnerable and most open, when you're trying to make something better, when you're saying, like, this is not finished yet, it still needs help me. And when someone, like, when you're reaching out to someone for help and they're sort of smacking your hand down and saying, like, you're dumb for even attempting this, it was really difficult, and it was really hard, and it really, like, damaged a lot of the relationship. And that play sort of, she didn't want to work on it anymore, and, like, I didn't have an outlet for it. And that piece, that whole play just sort of died on the vine after that, even though we kept trying to do it, but just like the bad taste of that experience sort of carried through. So yeah, that was a pretty horrible time, but
No, that's wait, and how old were you roughly?
Like 24-ish, 25.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So you were, I mean, this is very early in your creative maturation. And this could be, I mean, something like that could have been soul sucking to the point where and confidence crushing to the point where you just gave up pursuit of this, and you got that, cubicle career for, the next 40 years.
Yeah, it's hard. I've seen that. I was part of a group, and then I saw one playwright basically just completely destroyed by an older established famous playwright who just eviscerated him to the point that I don't think he's had another play since then, and he's really stopped writing for a long time. So he's starting to slowly get back into writing, but it really so damaged him, because again, it's about vulnerability, and it's about trust, and about opening up and saying, like, and again, you can not like something. All times I've sat through readings and things with people who I personally really love, and they make something that's not to my taste. And again, I've also put up, art that I look back on and cringe a bit at. But I think, too, to find our art, I think you have to make a lot of shitty art to eventually get to making good art too. And and sometimes you don't know the difference, but sometimes it's about making things, and and putting them out and trying, because you can always not make things for a long time, but hopefully making something is where you can find things that eventually you move on with.
Right. And those of you who are newer writers, you're still early in your journey, whether it's playwrights, screenwrites, audio drama, manuscripts, novels, whatever. There is, it's one of those things that I often told my kids: respect yourself enough to not allow someone else to disrespect you. And when it comes to your art, like Jonathan said, this is you are very vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there. And there's a distinct line between constructive criticism and Jonathan's example. I mean, either himself or the other playwright he was talking about, there's nothing constructive in that. You have to protect yourself from that kind of stuff. We owe it to other creatives to say, hey, this type of thing, horror is not my thing, Paul, but, I like what you did here. I think this could have worked better here. I can run with that. So it's a dynamic relationship as artists, but that is something we do. But please, folks, take what he just provided, that very, I can imagine that was traumatizing experience, especially as a young creative. And, again, heed the advice. Be careful what you open yourself up to, and allow yourself the permission to not be treated like that. Jonathan, I really appreciate that story, because there's so many lessons that can be taken from that.
Yeah, it's one of those things, but it's also, don't be afraid to be open and vulnerable either. You have to balance it. take advice, but then also as you grow as a writer, learn what advice you don't need to take as much as you learn what advice to take, and don't feel like you don't have to take anyone's advice if you don't want to. But if you go to advice and you're getting the same advice maybe 10 times, then maybe at least look at that. If multiple people are telling you the same thing, might be an area to look at. But everyone is also going to bring their personal opinions and passions and weirdness to things. So sometimes you're going to get advice that is completely wrong, and it's okay to let that go also.
Yes. Yes. So let's talk about some of this. Now that we've shared that, let's talk about the better end of the story here. You had that experience, you didn't quit, and now you've got an awesome audio drama that's being heard around the world and will continue to be heard and grow, I imagine. Because regardless of whether musicals are the thing or not yet, at some point, audio drama, everything, it's an ebb and flow, folks. Just because what you're writing right now isn't the hot thing doesn't mean that it won't be. Everything, the one constant is change. So there may come a point when musicals are, and even if they're not, Jonathan, it's still going to grow because it's quality and people just migrate toward quality. So let's talk about the show. What is it about? What can listeners of Horrible Writing go find now? And maybe a little bit about what we can expect in the future.
Okay. Well, we just finished season 2 of the show about a month or two back. And now we're in sort of early pre-production for the 3rd season. The show starts when children's show host Brushy Sunshine is killed via bullets fired through space-time through a wormhole, and sort of broke down noirish Detective Dan Kent has to solve the case. And then it sort of spirals into a tooth cult, evil puppets, and a plot to sort of fuzz the world. And it sort of plays again with all kinds of tropes and genres, and the plot is always sort of propelling forward. And there's 3 original songs in every episode, many characters, just sort of weird, zany fun. I draw a lot from like Theater of the Ridiculous, from campy movies, from history, from noir, from sci-fi, from everywhere. Basically, it's just sort of a crazy toy box where we throw a million things in. Hopefully, it's sort of manic and fun and zany and weird. And it's sort of what it does. It's just sort of, again, writing to weird things that we want to just see and play with, and using audio drama as a medium, because you can really do whatever you want, make things that are so big and gigantic and fun, and just we just have a fun, crazy time with it. And we brought in an amazing group of actors and singers. A lot of them were on Broadway. Some are on Broadway right now. And it's a great way to hear a bunch of just amazingly talented people making something insanely weird and fun. And, if you don't like what's going on, wait like 5 seconds and something else totally different will happen. So, yeah, there you go.
How big is your over the completed seasons, the cast size over those 2 completed seasons?
Over 20 people, easy. 20, 25. Again, too, we like to try to bring people back, or we sometimes have people double up on roles and things. But again, too, it's just a lot of it was who we worked with, my Matt and I, that, what actors we worked with that we want to just bring in and have fun with. And because we kind of we record everybody together, not together, but we record them all while we're there in the room. We don't really do remote recording except for 1 or 2 people, especially because all the music is so hard to do. But, we bring in all these people who are like, we love and who we've worked with and we've done plays with, our musicals. And we're like, let's show them off too. Because it's also like, we love these people and we want to show how amazingly crazy talented they are. And, we trust them. And again, my writing is sort of weird and quirky. And so not everyone, as I've learned over time, can handle it or do it or is right for it. But there's a great group of people who are, and finding those new people and then really expanding from there and just really getting to work with those people is so exciting and fun, because again, you can call people in for like a day or a couple hours who are otherwise really super busy doing their own things.
It's awesome. I mean, the talent is there. It's evident from the get-go. Though you do have to let Matt know. I don't remember what episode. I do believe it was 2nd season, though. He did a heavy metal song finally, and I was very pleased to hear that, because I'm a huge metal head. So,
good.
It was a fun one. It was very up-tempo. It was great. What's behind the name? Is there a secret that you can share? Or is there really nothing? It was just something quirky that you just fell in love with.
For which? For All the House of Sunshine or for...
No, the brushy.
Oh, brushy Sunshine. Yeah. It was just the name. It's the name of the character who's killed in the first episode. It was just sort of, since they're sort of like a tooth-based children's show about brushing your teeth, it was just brushy. And then the Sunshine was just sort of like a positive, upbeat sort of name that you think like a Mr. Rogers type person would have. And so that's sort of where we came up with like that. And then sort of back creating the whole history of the Sunshine family and relating to this sort of dental cult, sort of Mormon-esque sort of society in Indiana where he comes from. And sort of, and like in the one episode, we sort of do this whole pageant song about the history of the Dentites as they sort of have to leave and follow the Urtooth and the tooth-shaped star across the plains. And it sort of follows that sort of American Manifest Destiny sort of cultish sort of thing that we play with. So, again, too, it's sort of what interests us and just kind of throwing them together and seeing weird combinations of that. So that's where Brushy Sunshine comes from.
It's very fresh, folks, and it's you're not going to find stuff out there. And again, it's not some half-effort production by any stretch. I'm a snob when it comes to stuff because there's just too many choices out there to listen to things that, in my opinion, people didn't spend a whole lot of time working on. And this is not one of those shows. You'll be amazing. When you hear it, if you didn't hear this interview first, when you do hear it and you didn't know this, you would be amazed that that's an independent group of people working on that. It's that good. So if you trust me on these things, definitely go check it out. So, Jonathan, where on the interwebs can people find you if they want to reach out, find out more about you, about the show?
You go to podmusical.com, podmusical.com. I couldn't spell musical in my head just then. Sorry. Podmusical.com or the Podmusical at Twitter. You can email podmusical@gmail.com. We got lucky. We found that was available on all formats and we jumped on it as soon as we could. Good. So yeah, or just Google Fall the House of Sunshine because again, as I said, it's a Googleable title. So we try to make it so you can find it. And and then you can, if you like it, you can support us on Patreon or buy the soundtrack, buy our merch. Also just contact us. We just love any kind of positive feedback. Again, we just love knowing people are out there and listening, even if you can't support us in any sort of financial way. It is all self-funded, self-produced. We have no advertisers, nothing at this point. We're just putting it out, just trying to make art and put it out in the world. So if you're interested in supporting indie creators, either us or anybody, know that your dollar goes so far when it's just a couple people doing it for the love of doing it. So there you go. That is
the truth. That is the truth. And I will back it up. But you definitely check it out, folks. You'll enjoy it. I mean, Jonathan, you were a great guest, and I do really look forward to what you have coming out. But I do appreciate this. This isn't something a lot of people would be willing to talk about. And you shared really openly and really rawly, but you shared things that can help people today, because this is something we all deal with. So I really do appreciate it, and I appreciate your time coming on the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for doing this show. And it's a good, it's a good resource. There's no point, especially between us, between artists and all, not to be honest about the things we're facing. I think too often we do sort of feel like we have to present this best self. And I mean, also for me being a small indie creator, there's really very little risk to being this honest because I'm not going to lose jobs or I'm not going to lose anything. And, I think all of us are struggling in different ways and we too often hide that from each other. And it's not just saying like the first time you're like, hi, I'm this person, here's all my problems. But I think when we talk shop, we can talk shop openly and say like, here's what I have trouble with. And I think on the same level of just having trouble, like if you're like, I need this sort of sound effect or I need this kind of thing, we can also just talk about that in the sense of what we need as creators to be healthy, productive members of this society.
Yes, definitely. And that's what this is about, folks. So take this forward into battle and keep being epic. This has been Horrible Writing, and hopefully after this episode, you suck less than you did at the beginning. I am Paul Sadin, your host extraordinaire. You can find me over on the Twitterverse @WritingHorrible and over at paulsadin.com/horrible-writing. Until next time, suck less.